Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. Donald Trump continues repeating false claims that the 2020 election was stolen from him. And those bogus claims still hold significant sway within the Republican Party. A Monmouth poll conducted last summer found roughly 3 in 10 Americans still believe Joe Biden's 2020 victory was fraudulent. And 68% of Republicans polled say he won, quote, due to voter fraud. How could those claims, which all fell apart under scrutiny and in court, still hold such a firm grip on so many people? One theory? Well, it could be confirmation bias. The United States suffers from a national case of confirmation bias. Rational, intelligent people have abandoned their ability to process information logically. Instead, they exclusively search for information that confirms their existing beliefs, reject information that undermines their views, and interpret and even misinterpret information in ways that validate what they already think. So how do we break through that barrier? There may be no better qualified person to discuss whether voter fraud impacted the 2020 presidential election than the person hired by the Trump campaign to find it. And that's the person who joins us now. Ken Block writes, I was paid by the Trump campaign to look for evidence of massive voter fraud. I did so to the best of my ability. I left no stone unturned. No evidence at all of massive voter fraud was discovered. My findings were communicated to the highest levels of our federal government. And yet, to this day, former President Trump, failed politicians like Kerry Lake, and hangers-on such as Mike Lindell, CEO of MyPillow, talk about massive voter fraud as if it has been proven many times over. Ken Block is now on the record. Ken, it's great to have you with us. You hunt dead voters, zombie voters, ghost voters, and turns out you found a few. How close did you come to proving voter fraud stole the election from Mr. Trump?
We were very far away from proving in any of the swing states that enough fraud was that was detectable and provable, that enough fraud was there to have come close to meeting the margin of victory in any of those states. We were very far away.
You go through in detail many of those in state-by-state breakdowns in this book. You've sent it to us here, the book Disproven, really a must-read for anyone who believes still that voter fraud hurt the Trump campaign in 2020. You call it, quote, your unbiased search for voter fraud for the Trump campaign, the data that shows why he lost, and how we can improve our elections. I was most interested in that last part. You write that true fraud is detectable, quantifiable, and verifiable, especially fraud sufficient to alter the outcome in an election in which thousands of votes measure the margin of victory. So on that last part, how we improve our elections, are there cases of voter fraud that you that couldn't find in the data that might somehow evade your detection?
And I had available to me every shred of data that was available in that time window in which to conduct the protest. We looked exhaustively. The Trump campaign lawyers who hired me to do this work absolutely accepted my findings, which said that we didn't come close. We did find some dead voters in some states. We did find some people who voted twice in 2 different states, but nowhere near the quantities that were necessary. The lawyer that I reported to, Alex Cannon, took the summation of my findings, which was there was no voter fraud, brought it to Mark Meadows, told Mark Meadows, who was Trump's chief of staff at the time, that sufficient voter fraud was not proven. And Mark Meadows told the Washington Post he took that message right into the Oval Office.
Chapter 9 in your book asks, did non-citizens vote in Arizona? That's the chapter title. You say, quote, a few, almost certainly. A lot, impossible to know. Is it really impossible to know if the federal government has this immigrant database you write about?
It is currently impossible to know. And the reason for that is because although the Department of Homeland Security does have a database of non-citizens who are in the country, by federal law, that database cannot be used for any external purpose to what the Department of Homeland Security uses it for. Once we were able to look at, if we were ever able to use that database, we would find that there are a great many folks who should be in it who aren't. And I believe ultimately, because you have people effectively living in the shadows when it comes to how they participate in our society, whether or not they have social security numbers and other types of identification, it's incredibly difficult to say with any certainty, without access to some of this identifying information, that you have the person who you think you have based on name and date of birth and that sort of thing. It's really, really hard. and there's no evidence other than unbacked up statements that there's a lot of non-citizen voting. I haven't seen it, and I question whether somebody who's wants to remain here and doesn't really want to stick their head up, I question why they would choose to cast an illegal vote.
Right, and then from there, for whom would they vote? That's a whole different question.
Correct.
Republicans running for Attorney General here in Missouri are repeating publicly Trump's false claims that the election was stolen. One of them actually is representing Trump in court during his trials. I'd like to ask you to evaluate the specifics of their claims. A recent town hall moderator asked Attorney General Andrew Bailey, quote, "Do you believe the 2020 presidential election was stolen?" Here's what Bailey said.
Yeah, absolutely. It was absolutely stolen. The left stole that election by changing the rules of the game at the 11th hour. They're going to try to steal this one by silencing our voices on big tech social media platforms, by stifling us in the mainstream media, and by packing the polling places with criminal, illegal aliens that shouldn't be here in the first place.
What do you make of that last part, that, quote, criminal, illegal aliens are going to pack the polling places? I think you wrote in your book that voting in person is the hardest place to commit fraud.
That's precisely true. I'm assuming that the Attorney General is a lawyer. As a lawyer, he should be fully aware that hearsay, anecdotal evidence is not acceptable evidence in any court of law. What he's doing is he is parroting campaign propaganda. He's not making legal statements. And in my world and what I was hired to do for the Trump campaign, within the context of what the campaign was doing in the month of November 2020, which was trying to make an ironclad legal case that the election should have been overturned, not a word that came from your Attorney General could ever have been used in any of the court cases in which I was considering evidence at the time.
So it raises further suspicion. It does not prove much of anything. I want to ask you to evaluate a similar claim from Will Scharf, who happens to be representing Trump and worked on legal teams that helped to confirm Justices Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett to the U.S. Supreme Court. He answered that same question this way.
Yeah, it was stolen. It was rigged. Call it whatever you will. In the 2020 election, out of 159 million ballots cast, over 100 of them were earlier absentee. It's absolutely unprecedented in American history. Many of those ballots were cast totally extra legally, whether it was a lack of signature verification, whether it was the late submissions in Pennsylvania. You can go on and on and on.
You write in your book that inconsistency is the enemy of integrity. There were inconsistencies in how states went about changing the rules in 2020. Does Mr. Scharf have a point?
There were court challenges to some of the rules changes that were made. So the court system has weighed in on a lot of what I believe his claims were in terms of whether or not the rules were changed in a legal manner.
For any voters who may be rightly skeptical or concerned about the integrity of this upcoming 2024 election, what would you tell them? How would you inoculate them from being misled? What should they look for? What would be the telltale signs of an election conducted with integrity or one that had legitimate questions?
The very first thing for everybody is to understand the difference between legally admissible evidence and hearsay evidence. If you're considering something that somebody says, I saw a trailer truck full of ballots, I saw a pile of ballots in a ditch, or I saw somebody doing something nefarious, this isn't proof that you can bring to court. It has to be evidence that the legal system will accept. And there was very precious little of that in 2020. And I was paid to be very careful, very diligent, and to deliver the evidence necessary to win court cases. That was what I was paid to do. And my team was unable to find the evidence necessary to win a court case in any of the swing states. The campaign's top lawyers accepted that as the truth. So for anybody who believes otherwise, we went all the way through it in the legally prescribed way. We couldn't get there. I know a lot of eyes will be on 2024, and hopefully we can, through diligence and being very careful to explain things, help people understand and differentiate between hearsay claims of fraud, which everybody should ignore, and actual fraud in which we should be taking some action.
In other words, if you're going to make the big claim that the leader of the free world is illegitimate, you better do your homework and you better bring some concrete proof.
Absolutely, 100%.
All right, Ken Block, thank you so much for joining us. Our full conversation is up on KSDK.com. You can find it there or leave us a tip or a note if you just text RECORD to 314-425-5355.